why some of our things are not working is because a lot of people in national government want to look at revenue raised nationally as revenue of national government, and they think, therefore, that they are doing a favor to the county governments by giving them some money. That is part of the problem.
Counties are not getting their money regularly, so they can't plan well. Some of the money comes in the last month, so they are not able to spend it, and then we keep complaining that counties are not working.
So you're not doing counties a favor. So this evening, on the big story, we are talking about that standoff between the National Assembly and the Senate on division of revenue. So for those of you who are not very good in maths like me, this is where Swahili friends will tell you, pambana na hali yako. Because the amounts we're talking about here are crazy. So let me just let you know what happened. So Senate wants 335 billion allocated to counties. The National Assembly is proposing 310 billion. Those two houses seem not to agree on the numbers. The CRA seems to be on the side of the Senate. So which way will this go? Let's bring in our lead reporter, Sophia Wanuna, who is speaking to Moses Kajwang, Homa Bay Senator, just speaking his mind on that back and forth between the two houses that some say could grind counties to a halt. Sophia.
Good evening, Linda. So today, the Institute for Social Accountability held a forum with stakeholders around the subject of devolution. And the question posed to all attendees was, has the national government killed devolution? And that's a question I want to pose to my guest right now, the Senator, Homa Bay County. He's also the chairperson of the Public Accounts and Investments Committee. Kajwang, thank you so much, Moses, for making time for us. So do you think the national government has killed, in essence, or is killing devolution?
Oh, thank you, Sophia. My view is that the national government is quite lukewarm on devolution, and I'll give three reasons. Number one, the national government has always released monies to counties in a manner that is inconsistent with the schedules that Parliament has passed. We have seen even in prior financial years where counties are receiving money on the last day of the financial year and they are expected to spend that money. That goes a long way in frustrating the objects of devolution. Number two, the national government continues to draw structures that are parallel to devolved governments. We saw the Matiang'i-led National Government Coordinating Committee, which has structures all the way to the counties. Now, sometimes we view that the national government is still interested in maintaining the provincial administration and the central command and control structure that was there prior to devolution. So when you go to a county, you'll find that the county commissioner is chairing meetings to review projects. Some of those projects, in terms of quantum, are bigger than the projects that the county governors are running. And thirdly, the national government still holds on to certain functions and funds for activities that have been devolved. For example, in the health sector, health is fully devolved. The only thing that is in the hands of the national government is policy and national referral hospitals. But you see every year, the health budget at the national level is not going down, it is increasing. Roads, agriculture. So yes, the national government, we cannot say that it intends to kill devolution wholesome, but its attitude has been fairly lukewarm. We would wish the national government to be more enthusiastic about devolution than it has been in the past.
Yeah. And yet, Senator, what we see is the national government, the president, saying that they are committed to devolution, talking about the figures, increased funding, and the kind of meetings we see once in a while with the devolution conferences. There's the council where they also get to interact. They express commitment. So is that all words and not back to the action? And combine that for me with the fact that you have some of the Big Four agenda being devolved functions. So is that political will in word but not in action?
Well, we must first of all start from the perspective that Kenya is a unitary state. We are one nation, not divided by 47. it is a unitary state. It is not a federal state. And so devolution does not start and end with counties. And to an extent, we hear the national government, when they talk about their commitment to devolution, it is not just about giving money to counties and letting counties do what they need. What, in my view, has been a disappointment is that the fulcrum to devolution, there is this ministry that we set up at the national level. Its job was to make sure that counties on one hand thrive and deliver their functions as prescribed in the Constitution, and national government also follows by fulfilling their obligations to those counties. But we have seen a situation where the devolution ministry has in the past appeared to be a prefect for counties rather than a facilitator for counties. Yes, a lot of money has gone out to counties. If you look at it, if you quantify, it's more than 1 trillion Kenya shillings to counties. But the question is that money adequate? My personal view, and a view that has been held by the Senate, is that even that 1 trillion is inadequate considering the functions that have been devolved. Yeah. The 15% that we set out in the Constitution, as we devolve more functions, as we devolve roads, as we devolve healthcare, as we devolve ECD, libraries, harbors and ferries, we believe that the money that is going to counties needs to grow. If you look at the proposals that Treasury has put before the House, instead of growing the allocation to counties, they are proposing to reduce the allocation to counties. And yet, you expect counties to do more. And yet, you expect to use counties to be the delivery base for the big four. Things like food security cannot be achieved from Nairobi, can only be achieved by enabling counties to invest in agriculture, to invest in irrigation, to invest in aquaculture. So we need to see more money going to the counties. Right. The fact that we are putting 1 trillion, the fact that we have met the 15% minimum threshold is not good enough.
Yeah. And one of the sentiments that came out from today's meeting, especially at a time we're talking about public debt, is that on one hand, the counties participate, they were arguing, in repayment of public debt, but not in the benefits of it, so that the only distribution of resources is on revenue collected and not debt. The money that is borrowed does not trickle down to the counties as well. The national government holds it, is what the argument was, but yet repayment the counties are expected to. Do you find that an unfair balance, if at all it is a balance?
I do agree with that analysis, because when we look at revenues, we are looking at revenues that have been generated or collected locally at the exclusion of foreign debt. But beyond that, there is also another disadvantage that counties have, that when we are computing the division of revenue, or when we are computing the amount of money that should be going into counties, we first of all take out debt. We first of all take out national projects or national priorities, like the laptop project, like the National Youth Service, and then whatever remains is what is divided between the national government and county governments. So yes, people in counties are bearing that burden of debt, and unfortunately, that debt is being utilized by people in Nairobi. And from what we have seen in recent headlines, that money is not being used for the purposes that it is intended for. That money is ending up is lining people's pockets, while it could have gone to the counties to spur agriculture, to spur food production, to spur manufacturing, and to build houses so as to achieve the Big Four agenda.
And a stalemate still stands now in terms of revenue allocation. There's the mediation that is ongoing. So the allocation by National Assembly, 310 billion. The Senate and county governments asking for 335 billion. The Commission of Revenue Allocation agreeing with Senate on this one. So the question becomes, if they do not agree, they do not settle this issue, what happens?
It is always believed that Parliament will always act in the best interest of the people that they represent. The National Assembly and the Senate, we represent the same people. It is just the way the people we present are clustered that could be different. We represent the counties. National Assembly represents people in constituencies, but they're the same people. At the end of the day, it's not about supremacy between National Assembly and the Senate. Secondly, as I said,
yet we've seen that play out, Senator, the supremacy battles, even in legislation. We saw Senate lamenting that National Assembly was sidelining Senate.
I do agree, but when sometimes we rally together, even though we are famous for rallying together when it comes to our terms and benefits, but I think that this is something that affects Mwananchi directly. I am convinced that we shall reach an agreement. What the Senate has stated makes a lot of sense. In the last financial year, counties were allocated 314 billion. You cannot allocate them less. And if you're going to grow, and the president, I remember not too long ago, told us that the economy is growing. Senate is saying, let us grow the allocation to counties by at least 4%. It makes sense. If the economy has been growing, then the allocation to counties also ought to grow in a corresponding fashion. We were told the economy was growing at 6%. We are not even asking for a 6% growth to counties, just a 4% growth to counties to shoulder the inflationary pressure. But that does not even take into account the functions that have been, have been transferred subsequently to counties. We are looking at the roads bill currently. The roads bill proposes to transfer more roads or more kilometers of roads to counties. How are they going to finance that? We are talking of the big four that is on everyone's lips, and all the four dimensions have a bearing on devolution. How are we going to achieve manufacturing? How are we going to achieve housing? How are we going to achieve food security and universal health if we don't do it through counties? The government in Nairobi has got no capacity to deliver on the objectives of the big four if they are going to do it from Nairobi. They can only do it through counties. And that's why any reasonable Kenyan, looking at the little time remaining in President Uhuru's administration, would expect that we should be seeing more money going directly into some of those functions.
Do you have the share concern that was raised earlier today that there's over-politicization on the distribution of revenue, that perhaps it needs to be more predictable even for proper planning for the counties, that every year that we keep going round and now it has gotten to mediation, that is problematic?
We set in law and in the Constitution we have the Commission for Revenue Allocation. It was given a broad mandate, and part of its mandate was to advise Parliament and the nation as a whole on sources of revenue and how that revenue would be shared between different levels of government. Unfortunately, we have not given the Commission on Revenue Allocation the space and prominence that it deserves. If you look at the Salaries and Remuneration Commission, they can have their way, and the President will always stand with them and defend them. But when it comes to the Commission on Revenue Allocation, which is staffed by some of the best brains we have, some of the best economists we have in this republic, we want to take their recommendations as not worth the paper that it's written on. It is time the Treasury respected the Commission on Revenue Allocation. It is time we respected the institutions we have established. Otherwise, we have no business having the Commission on Revenue Allocation, enjoying taxpayers' money, enjoying commissions, and enjoying funding from the public if you're not going to listen to them. This was supposed to be a way for us to be, consistent and to be predictable about our revenue sources. There are two things the Commission on Revenue Allocation is supposed to do. One is to advise us on the basis of allocation of revenue, and also to advise us on the basis of sharing of revenue. Really, if you have that kind of professionalism giving us advice, we better listen to it. Treasury has always ignored what the Commission on Revenue Allocation says, and it has, in fact, traditionally, it is the Senate that has been the one listening to the Commission on Revenue Allocation. It shouldn't be a ping pong. It shouldn't be this uncertain. Because, right now, counties are doing their budgets. They don't know what to budget. Because most of the counties, you'll find that on-source revenue comprises less than 5% of their revenues. They need to see a clear signal from the national parliament to enable them to also predict how they're going to run their budgets in the next financial year. But at this rate, they're going to wait up to the last minute. But I'm hopeful that there's going to be an agreement because we cannot allow our people to suffer as a result of egos of people sitting in Nairobi.
And it has also been argued that counties have borrowed their quote-unquote bad manners from the national government, whether it is that a large portion of its revenue and the money allocated to it is going to salaries, to recurrent expenditure, very little to development. So I wonder then if you find merit in the proposal by the Controller of Budget to perhaps downsize the number of counties so that we keep talking about this cake that is, we're not creating a bigger cake, but we are really wanting to cut and massacre it. At the end, we might all end up getting not even a cake in terms of a piece, but pretty much, what are those little things that fall off a cake?
The crumbs.
The crumbs, exactly. Yes. So do we need to consider that?
Well, I would place the blame squarely on the president's shoulder on that issue of bloated workforce in counties. And I know many people would wonder what the President of Kenya has to do with it. The President chairs an organ called the Summit. The summit is the highest decision-making organ in devolved government circles. We have the summit chaired by the president. We have the IBEC that is chaired by the deputy president. Before the summit right now is a report of the Intergovernmental Relations Technical Committee. That report is making certain recommendations on how to deal with issues that have been inherited from defunct local authorities. And these are debts, these are liabilities, these are assets, these are liabilities, and even issues to do with personnel. The president has not convened a meeting of the summit so that they can agree on how to proceed with this matter. The problem of high wage bill in counties is an inherited problem. Many of these counties were amalgamated from many local authorities. For example, my county of Homa Bay is an amalgamation of 7 local authorities. So you'll find 7 people doing the same job, and they cannot be dealt with, they cannot be sent home, simply because if you send them home, you must pay them a pension. But that pension is trapped in all these rigmarole of defunct local authorities and IGRTC. So in as much as the president is pointing fingers at governors, he must also play his bit by making sure that summit reviews this report and provides a way forward. But secondly, county governors, beside the wage bill, because you have seen even in the Public Accounts Committee, the average wage bill in most counties is at 40 or 45%, whereas the PFM Act requires it to be at about 35%. But there's another class of waste. That is what we call operations and maintenance. The mandazis and mafutas and the things that they spend money on, that is not really a priority. Governors have got an opportunity to shrink the allocation to operations and maintenance by a further 10%. That way, they can still be able to deliver 30 to 40% of the funds that they receive into development. So it's a multi-pronged thing. The president must help us deal with the inherited liabilities, but governors must also cut off the fat. There's absolutely no reason why a governor should walk around with 4 vehicles, because if you reduced it to 1 or 2, then already that cost has been reduced correspondingly. Yeah. So they must also spare us from the drama, and that way reduce their expenditure and enable more money to go into the more productive sectors of our economies.
Thank you very much. Senator Moses Kajwang, he is a Homa Bay senator, also the chairperson of the Committee of Public Accounts and Investments in the Senate. And of course, at the end of the day, the question continues, Linda, is devolution living up to its bidding to bring power closer to the people and resources as well? More importantly, development, what really matters to Wanjiko, everyday services, public services being provided to them. Linda?
Yeah, is devolution working or not? Is it worth it at the end of the day? Looking at the amounts that are being allocated to the county governments and looking at the story that we've had in the last couple of months of wastage from different counties. We've seen several governors being questioned by EACC on how their counties have been spending public funds. So yes, this is a conversation that we absolutely need to have this evening. So let me just remind you that there seems to be a stalemate between the National Assembly and the Senate. They are supposed to meet on Thursday and just try and deliberate and see whether or not they can forestall that problem that stands between the two houses. But let's have this conversation this evening with Wanjiro Gikonyo from Institute for Social Accountability. We also have Didmus Baraza, who is the Member of Parliament Kimileli. He's joining us from our City Center studio. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us on The Big Story this evening. Mheshimiwa Didmus Baraza, let me begin with you on the backdrop of what Kajwang has just said, that the national government is lukewarm to devolution. What the Senate is asking for in terms of that allocation is sensible.
Yes, I want to agree with him that counties need more money. And anybody in this country, man or woman, regardless of the position he or she holds in the society, who is against counties getting more money, that person is not only the enemy of the people of Kenya, but is also the enemy of development. Because we must devolve more money on the counties. Now, the theories that are against devolving more money to the counties are that governors are misusing these resources, and that some parts of the country have not felt the fruits of devolution. And that one is largely lies on the shoulders of the senators. I will blame the senators for the wanton security corruption in the county levels. I'll also blame the Senate of the Republic of Kenya to be responsible as to why some parts of these countries are not really experiencing the fruits of devolution. I say so because Senate has become a busybody. They are overrating themselves. You found out that they are summoning national government ministers. They have no business summoning the Minister for Health. They have no business summoning the Minister for Lands. They have no business through their committees interrogating or rather investigating things to do with the Ruaraka land, things to do with the Solai Dam tragedy. What they are supposed to be doing is that they are supposed to be summoning the county executive committee members. I would want to see a scenario where they have lined up a schedule to meet with the county executive members of various counties of this country to be able to put them to task to explain to them the plans they have in terms of proper utilization of these devolved funds. And the failure to be meeting the county executive members, I think I can summarize that the Senate of this country is just a deadbeat father of devolution.
So Senate is a deadbeat father of devolution. Let me ask you, Mheshimiwa, so do you think they should have a say in that equitable share that is now causing a stalemate between the Senate and the National Assembly?
Yes, I want to agree. And when you say that the National Assembly has proposed reduction of the revenue allocation, it's true, but that doesn't mean that all members of the National Assembly of course, the way the National Assembly works, it works on the basis of the majorities having their way. But some of us who really supported the Senate, we were very clear that we need more money at the county level. Every money that the national government collects, that money belongs to the people of Kenya. And the people of Kenya are not found in Nairobi, they are found in counties, and we must find a way of removing those who are opposed to counties getting more money from power or from positions which I can dare say they are misusing those positions. They were put in those positions by the people of this republic for the purposes of using those positions to spur economic growth and to spur development in every corner of this country. So I want the Senate to recollect itself. In terms of rating them, if somebody will ask me, I will say, I will give them 5%, 5 out of 100.
What would you give the National Assembly?
Of course, in terms of, I will give the Senate of Kenya 5% in line with their role in safeguarding devolution. But the National Assembly, in terms of checking our roles, I will give them 60%. In terms of legislating laws, in terms of oversight, we've tried to do a good job in this country.
Wanjiru Gikonyo. Wanjiru, can you hear me?
I can hear you very well.
Okay, so we seem to have an issue over this equitable share. And I know that you're a big advocate for devolution. What goes through your mind when you see this back and forth between the Senate and the National Assembly on that share? Senate wants 335 billion, National Assembly says 310. They have not agreed as we speak. And there's that fear that perhaps counties could grind to a halt if this is not resolved.
Thank you so much, and it's a pleasure to be on once again. Just a slight correction. Senator Kajwang talked about Kenya as a unitary, government. Properly speaking, under a unitary government, the national government can rescind the powers of the subnational government. A federal government, though, enjoys powers that can't be rescinded, and those are normally derived from the Constitution. So Kenya actually is somewhere between a unitary and a federal government, because the national government, under the Constitution of Kenya, cannot rescind the mandates or the existence of counties. In other words, if you draw an organogram of the government of Kenya, national government is here, county governments are here, they have equal but different powers. And the constitution then assigns them these different functions. This is important because the revenue raised nationally is raised by the national government. Counties have their own revenue raising powers that are not enough to meet the service delivery mandates of counties, because counties were given extensive service delivery: agriculture, water, health, early childhood education. So the amount of work that counties need to do to give us service exceed their revenue generating capacity. Now, that's not to say counties are performing well on revenue generation. No, there are some that are actually seriously underperforming. Others, it will take time because you have to build the local economy to generate that revenue, and that also depends on the macro economy, which is under the national government.
Okay.
So the point here is that this revenue must be shared under the constitutionally. It's not a favor. It's not Big Brother saying, well, we think we'll give you this. The objective need is, what do Kenyans need to enjoy health services?
Okay. Just hold on to that. Wanjiru, hold on just for a few minutes. I need to take a break.